All right. All right. I believe we are live now. What's going on, everybody? Perfect timing as I will bring Henry into the stream. One of the OGs of the Thursday start sit stream. He and Coach took over for me last year when my real life job got in the way. Nice to have him back here after 7 weeks. Been a while since we've talked, man. How are you? I know you're in a new residence out west. You getting all settled in? How are things out there?
Oh, we're holding up just fine. Been busy with work myself here this fall, so nice to be able to have a Thursday evening to myself here and be able to hop on, and hopefully we can help the people out with some fantasy plays here this week. Interesting NFL slate coming up, so it's been an interesting year, really.
Definitely been an interesting year from the betting side of things, from real life football side of things. A lot of unders, a lot of sloppy offense, a lot of questions. I saw a stat that through 3 weeks, the average scoring in fantasy football is down 20% based on like the accumulative stats of the last 20 years. I think the stat was taken from since 2002 or 2003. Fantasy scoring on average down over 20%. So
makes sense though, right?
Yeah.
It's been ugly football, man. Ugly football.
Some ugly football. And before we dive too deep into fantasy stuff here, do you kind of attribute that more towards like, hey, things changed maybe 10 years ago or so as like the style of offense, people, the coaches, all these great offensive minds, you start hiring younger, more creative type minds. So the offense was exploding for a couple of years. Now, has the defense started to catch up? Are there just better athletes? Are there better schemes? Is this more of an offensive non-production issue, or just the fact that the defenses are finally catching up to all these new athletic players and schemes and all that?
I don't know that it's necessarily a defense catch up, offense got ahead or whatever type thing. Like, I think you're still looking at there are teams around the league, right, who are doing just fine offensively. And, even for me, I can look at it and say, all right, there's teams that are able to do both things against different defenses, right? Like the Bills are pass heavy offense. The Eagles are able to, they like to run the ball a little bit more. I think in both cases, you have a dual threat quarterback that gets out there. The Dolphins are another example. They can't run the ball, but they can pass. I look at football, just the sport in general, like at all levels right now, and it's becoming more and more stacked against defenses in terms of, you go and lay the wood on somebody like you did, even it feels like to me 5 years ago, as recently as then, and you're getting flagged for in college targeting or a personal foul or whatever. So to me, I think the struggles, the lack of fantasy production that you alluded to there with that stat, it comes as no surprise. And I think it's really chalks up to poor coaching, a lot of bad offensive line play too. Like, Is it just me, or are there like defensive fronts that, coming into the year or even last year, it's like, oh, they're okay, right? Like, I've looked at for example, the Jets defensive front, like Quinn Williams, guys like that, they're all right, but should they be completely like taking over games like they are? I don't know that we've seen that in past years. And so I blame coaches, coaching around the league, I think, more than anything.
Yeah. And, Zach Bruner is, he's the biggest rah-rah guy for offensive line play and how important it is, and how much one bad offensive lineman can screw everything on offense. And Dan Orlovsky had kind of a viral video just from a day or two ago that was going around where he was breaking down some Packers offensive film. And he pointed out on 2 out of the 3 plays that he broke down, everybody on the offense, 10 out of 11 guys are doing exactly what they should, but this one guy gets beat bad or doesn't follow his correct assignment or whatever, and the play completely gets blown up. So I definitely think offensive line play, whether it's injuries, bad drafting, maybe this crop of offensive linemen that we've had coming into the NFL the last bunch of years is not as good across the board as what we've seen in the past. I don't know. It could be a bunch of different things, but an interesting thing I saw about the Packers as well, they ranked first in the league in yards passing allowed. So they allow the fewest yards passing against them, but they're last in the league as far as pass completions. So they're giving up over 70% of completions, but nobody's really throwing the ball because they're so bad against the run. So it's like, well, why go away from what's working against these Packers? So I just thought that's kind of a crazy stat here. Number one in one passing category, and you're dead last in another. So I just thought that was kind of crazy. But it's good to have you back, Henry. Definitely looking forward to talking some fantasy football here with you. As far as last week went, Zach and I did pretty dang well. We fielded a lot of questions last week, and we were spot on in quite a bit of them. I was huge. I went out on a limb, and I told everybody, I told a lot of people at least, to start Brian Robinson if you had him. I thought that they were going to lean on him. I all but guaranteed a touchdown. We fielded a couple questions where it was, do I play Curtis Samuel or Brian Robinson tonight? I went with Brian Robinson, and he had 12 points. Curtis Samuel had only like 2.6 or something. He did find the end zone. So I'm glad I was able to at least come through for all of you last week, because we had a lot of Brian Robinson questions. So happy that one worked out. But while we're waiting on some questions here, Henry, I do have a couple things jotted down, just general fantasy questions that I kind of want to get your opinion on. Zach and I talked about these a little bit last week. So we'll start with Christian McCaffrey, because I would love your opinion here. And by the way, anybody in the chats, of course, the whole point of this stream, please toss us your questions. We'll stick around as long as you got those questions. Last week, we were trying to get off the air for like 10 minutes, and we just kept getting one last question. But definitely toss them our way. We'll be more than happy to answer those for you. But Henry, if Christian McCaffrey gets traded to, say, a team like the Bills, or even just maybe not, the Bills are arguably the best team in the NFL or the second best team in the NFL. Let's say he goes to a team that's in that 5-6 category, or even top 10 team, somewhere where he doesn't have to take he's not the only guy on offense. He doesn't have to touch the ball 30 times. He's not, the man that the whole offense runs through, like we've seen him be in Carolina for the last bunch of years. How much do you think his fantasy value potentially could drop depending on where we see him being traded?
I would say less now than it would have been a few years ago, back before he started struggling with injuries, right? Like, the Panthers offense is so bad that, McCaffrey's going out and he's getting you, 18 to 25 points per week, kind of feels like about the range for him right now, which is right around usually what he's projected. But are you getting those boom performances out of him anymore? Not really. But
even at 18 to 22, do you think he can keep up those kind of numbers if, he's one of 5 options on an offense rather than the option on an offense?
No, because I think if you're looking at him going to, I don't know who's in the trade market for him. For those who don't know, I'm like way up my ass in college football this year, more so than NFL. So hence why I haven't been on the streams weekly. But so I don't know who all exactly is in the trade market for him. I know the Bills are rumored, but if he's going to Buffalo or he's going to Philadelphia, for example, I'll pull out another strong team there. Even the 49ers, like when the backfield, Mitchell and Wilson, if they're healthy, he's in a committee regardless. I don't think any of those teams are going to be looking like, oh, let's feed Christian McCaffrey the ball 30 times a game. We want him fresh for when we're in the playoffs. The idea is to have multiple fresh backs going forward, I would say, for the few championship contending teams that there actually are this year. So his numbers are going to go down regardless. And I think you would be needing at least one touchdown, if not more, to kind of sustain maybe his standard production, if you will, in Carolina, because let's be honest, what else is there in Carolina? Not a whole lot.
Yeah, so I think we're all on the same exact page that if he does go anywhere, if he leaves, his fantasy value is going to drop. Now, my question is, how far does it drop? Like you said, he's that 18 to 22, 23 type guy right now pretty consistently. Is he dropping as far as 10 points a week, 12 points a week? Could we still expect 15 or 18? Let's say he does have to rely on those touchdowns. What are we expecting kind of out of him on a week-to-week basis? Is his value going to be cut in half? These are kind of the questions that I'm throwing out there for probably Christian McCaffrey owners this year, because if he gets traded and we see basically what he becomes in this new offense next year, like the draft and stuff, they'll adjust accordingly. People will have time to prepare and stuff. But for Christian McCaffrey owners this year, or people that maybe potentially were thinking, if he goes to a better team, maybe I should trade for him. That's probably the opposite mindset that you should have here, which is what we've been talking about the last couple of weeks. I'm just curious as to how far does he drop? Does he become a run-of-the-mill guy where you're getting 10, 12 out of him, or can he still put that 15, 18 number up there? That's what I'm going to be curious to see.
I think it's probably going to depend on the week. Now, the nice thing about McCaffrey, I would say, assuming you're not playing in a standard league, is that you do have that pass catcher floor there, right? So I'm just looking at some season-long running back numbers here. Of the top 5 running backs, Austin Eckler is the leading fantasy scorer. He's got 41 receptions. McCaffrey's got 33, and Fournette is at 32. Barkley and Chubb are RBs 2 and 3 on the season so far, and they're nowhere close. But then you get down after that, and I've got Joe Mixon here with 24 receptions on the season, and otherwise you're looking at, I've got the top 25 on this page here. Otherwise, the only other one is Devin Singletary, who somehow is RB 18 on the season. But same thing, it's that pass catcher floor, right? Like Singletary, not necessarily between the tackles rusher. He is the lead guy in that Bills backfield this year, but he's got 22 receptions. So 22 of Singletary's 68 points in a PPR format, which is your typical fantasy format, I would say at this point in time, what most leagues are. 22 of 68 points, almost a third, are coming on receptions alone. For McCaffrey, he's got 118 points scored this year, 33 receptions. You got 3 touchdowns in there as well. So, I think with your pass catcher floor, you're going to have a solid floor no matter where he goes, assuming he is involved in the passing game. I don't know where, to ballpark. I feel like saying 10 points a week, like if we're going to start projecting him for 10 PPR points a week, that's really low. So I would be thinking more kind of 15 to 18 is your window of expectation, depending on where he winds up, as opposed to what I would say maybe right now is 20 to 23. You're kind of expecting that out of him on a weekly basis just because the volume is so high. So not a huge drop off for sure, but, you're definitely looking at something. I do see a couple of questions too, by the way. Are you able to see those?
They're not showing up for me for some reason. I got the chat open, but
do you want me to read some of them also? These are showing up on the restream for me. I don't know.
Okay, I will look at that for a second. Well, just to finish up McCaffrey thoughts here, and then we can start fielding some of those questions. I think this might be the last year, if indeed he does get traded, and when he does, that he'll be in the mix for that top couple of picks. Where he's lived in fantasy drafts for forever, it seems like, in his career. I think he's going to be still a serviceable, high-picked running back, but his days as probably pick 1, 2, 3 overall or whatever are probably behind him. So definitely just something to keep interested, keep an eye on there. And another interesting thing you pointed out, Austin Eckler, it took him 3 weeks to find the end zone, but obviously he's exploded touchdown-wise the last couple of weeks. But he, leading into week 6 against Denver, so his first 5 weeks, he caught 33 of 34 targets. So like if the ball is thrown this guy's direction, that's just free points. So 33 of 34, pretty darn good. And then he went 10 for 16 against Denver, giving him that total receptions that you talked about there. But just kind of interesting to throw out there. His lowest performance on the year, week 1, 11.2. So Austin Eckler may be taking over the Christian McCaffrey, one of the top guys drafted here moving forward. I cannot see the questions, so if you want to, do you have the ability to throw them up on the screen? Just go ahead and we'll start diving in.
I don't know that I do have an ability to do that, or at least I don't know how to do it.
So if you hover over the comment, it'll say show. And if it doesn't say that for you, then you can't do it.
Yeah, I can't do it.
Okay. All right. Well, then we'll go old school here. I'll try and figure out why they're not showing up for me, but go ahead. Let's dive in.
Alrighty. So Q Cole has got a couple of different things coming at us from YouTube, but I'm gonna just go through Jair's, I believe, from Twitch. If I didn't say that right, apologies. It's a tight end question, though, and it's pertinent to tonight. Taysom Hill or TJ Hawkinson at tight end. I feel like this is a pretty quick answer for me. Taysom Hill obviously got a lot of attention, scored over 30 fantasy points there 2 weeks ago against the Seahawks. Last week came back less than 5 in a dud against the Bengals. Taysom Hill has not been on the field for more than 30% of the Saints' offensive snaps in any game so far this season. This is TJ Hawkinson, and it's not even close for me. Yeah, I know it's the Cowboys' defense. I know the Cowboys' pass defense is decent. I am looking at fantasy points allowed. The Cardinals allowing the second most to tight ends. Taysom Hill, though, not really your typical tight end. You got Chris Olave coming back this week as well, so that's another target in there for the Saints. Cowboys are upper half. They've allowed just under 9, it looks like, PPR points tight ends. But TJ Hawkinson, I still consider him to be, one of the, I won't say elite fantasy football tight ends, but he's a guy that if you have him on your roster, you're not overthinking things and you're rolling him out there as a weekly start.
Yeah, I think I like Taysom Hill tonight. Off a short week. Obviously, he is an amazing gadget player, had a big week last week. I think we're going to see a lot more of him tonight. If you can get – and Andy Dalton is starting again, right? Obviously, Andy Dalton's old. He's fragile. Who knows if who knows if Taysom Hill ends up playing quarterback for a portion of this game, whatever. I think if you got him, in my opinion, you're starting him tonight. And kind of going off that, though, a little bit, maybe of a tougher choice. We got K. Cole asked us Taysom Hill or George Kittle. I probably would lean Taysom. I think it's going to be a big hit. Thursday night. Strange mashup. I don't know why they go away from Taysom Hill after such a big game for him. I like Taysom Hill tonight. Especially, let's see, who's Kittle playing? Kittle's he's not the fantasy player he was a couple years ago, right? He's the 24th highest scoring tight end.
Playing the Chiefs, though.
Yeah, they're playing the Chiefs.
That's a favorable passing matchup. Now the Chiefs are allowing 14 fantasy points per game to tight ends this season.
So he pretty much Kittle against Atlanta pretty much matched his previous 3 weeks total. He obviously didn't play in week 1 or 2. So is this the launching point? Is this the Kittle that we're going to get against KC and the rest of the season? I don't know, but Taysom Hill certainly has the ability to throw a touchdown tonight, and that's half of the contribution that Kittle had last week right there. So I don't know. That one's a little bit tougher. What do you like there for a confident answer? I probably would play Taysom Hill. I just think it's going to be a Taysom Hill game, but especially he said he's already projected to lose by 30. So I'm looking maybe more, hey, if you're projected to lose by that much already because of bye weeks and whatever, you're probably looking for the boom, and the boom might come from Taysom Hill over George Kittle.
I don't know, man. Until I see Taysom Hill on the field more, like I agree with your arguments and everything. He's just, I don't know. I look at the snap percentages, and even the last 3 weeks, like when he's suddenly become fantasy relevant at the tight end position because no one else there. 20%, 30%, 21% of offensive snaps. I looked up an update on Winston just to make sure he is in fact active, which I thought I had seen that earlier, confirmed it. Supposedly he's going to be the number 3 quarterback behind Dalton and Hill. Obviously Andy Dalton's dealing with something with his back as well, but are we really going to go to Taysom Hill as the full-time quarterback? I think we've already seen that, and it doesn't work. I look at both of these questions, and I would stick to my guns. I think I've got solid tight ends in George Kittle and T.J. Hawkinson. I would roll with those guys in both. You know they're going to be on the field. You know they're going to be involved in the passing game at some point. To your point, maybe not as much as he's been in the past. Speaking of Kittle, but I also think that the 49ers are going to have to throw in that game to keep up with the Chiefs at some point.
So Zach has Kittle ranked as his third tight end this week. You can find those rankings over at FlurrySports.org or just click the link right here in the description, at least on YouTube. So again, maybe you've kind of talked me into what does your matchup look like, right? Like how competitive are you going to be this week? How many guys do you have on bye? If you don't need to take that massive risk, maybe you do plug in one of those tight ends that are, more of a sure thing and are going to get you maybe the points that you need. But like I said, for our friend Q Cole, if you're projected to lose by 30, Taysom Hill has found the end zone 5 times this year. And like I said, he has it's boom or bust potential. Like, yeah, he has a week that he went 1.4, 4.5, but he also has 15.3 and 41 2 weeks ago. Now, you can't expect anything near that 41 number again, but he could find the end zone rushing, or he could find the end zone passing through a trick play, whatever. I guess for me, I'd probably land on what is your projection? What does the rest of your lineup look like this week? If you're playing a bunch of waiver guys, streamer guys, and you're probably going to lose anyway, I say maybe roll the dice. 5 touchdowns in 6 weeks ain't too shabby for a guy that, like you said, hardly sees the field. He's only got, quick math here, 36 rush attempts on the season, but he's turned that into like 50 points and the number 4 overall tight end. So, and it's interesting, but I guess we'll leave that up to you guys if you think you should go with the solid tight end or try your luck with Taysom Hill. But our Q Call also says he wanted no running back in a 3 wide receiver league. He ended up with Chubb, but he only has Dillon, Jamal Williams, and Latavius Murray. Who do y'all think is a safer play at running back? So AJ Dillon, Jamal Williams, or Latavius Murray. Now, DeAndre Swift is back, correct? Back and active this week?
Indeed he is. Now, is he going to get his full allotment of touches? Potentially a different story. I mean, you know me, I'm going to say Jamal Williams is good enough to be involved in that backfield 50-50 anyway. So,
yeah, and Williams was phenomenal. I think he had a couple of down weeks, but so did the offense as a whole for the Lions. And really, it was just that one game against New England. Other than that, and Washington, it was pretty poor performance as well. But 3 out of 5 games so far, either pushing or well over 20 points. Especially, like you said, so Swift was probably ready to go the week before the bye if he absolutely had to. So including the bye now, I think he's probably relatively healthy, but that doesn't mean that Jamal Williams isn't going to be able to produce. AJ Dillon, for some reason, the Packers refuse to give the ball to their running backs in general. And they haven't had a lot of red zone opportunities, which is really where AJ Dillon shined and picked up a ton of points. Aaron Jones would get them down to, scoring position. And then it's AJ Dillon. And then who was the third option here? Sorry, it's a little harder when they're not popping up. I got to click back and forth here. Latavius Murray. He'd probably be the guy I would eliminate right away from this list of 3. So is there anything that you see from AJ Dillon that would make you lean his direction over Williams?
Absolutely not for the time being. So here's my thing. The Packers offense obviously is a work in progress, shall we call it right now. But going up against Washington this week, the way to beat the Commanders' defense is pretty clearly through the air, in my eyes. And I just pulled up DVOA numbers. So Washington is ranks 5th adjusted defensively against the run, 19th against the pass. The issues for the Commanders are in the secondary as far as defending the pass. So I actually would almost expect Green Bay to be shying away from running the ball. If there was a game they were going to do that, it would be this week, in my opinion. So I'm not really interested in Dylan. Latavius Murray was kind of interesting. Going up against the Jets, I know the Jets defense has improved. I already shouted out the defensive line once. I think there's some players up there, but they're kind of just so adjusted numbers. Looking at fantasy points allowed here, what do we have? So the Jets have been solid against running backs. I don't know, man. I don't think the Broncos are going to ride Melvin Gordon. Like that whole operation is just kind of sad to me. Like the fumble issues to start the year. He's all of a sudden Javonte Williams goes down. He has his opportunity and can't get anywhere. But the Broncos offense is a mess, right? Russell Wilson's dealing with a couple different injuries. Yeah, everybody hates him now. I don't know how Nathaniel Hackett has a head coaching job, if I'm being honest, but I don't think it's a run-first offense. Yeah, definitely not. Not past this season. It's interesting. The new ownership group isn't even tied to him. Like they didn't hire him to begin with. So,
right.
Like,
which is even a worse sign for him.
The only reason he got this job was to try and bring Rodgers with him to Denver. Like it's so blatantly obvious.
Yeah.
But
there were 3 coaches around Rodgers last season that all went on to bigger and better positions in other organizations. None of them are doing well, which is, maybe teams and franchise learn like, hey, we probably shouldn't hire the coaches of some of the greatest players of all time. What about some coaches that took a team that's expected to underperform or a guy that nobody thought was going to be a star and turn them into something? Maybe those are the guys that should get the looks, not, Aaron Rodgers, offensive coordinator, and Aaron Rodgers, quarterback coach. And it's just pretty funny.
It is indeed very funny. Yeah, so I guess I would be down to, as crazy as it sounds, if I was going to sit Jamal Williams, I think it would be at the expense of Latavius Murray, just because, 15 rushing attempts last week. He was only on the field for 47% of the snaps, but that's a workload that can take you places. And it was not a flashy line, 66 yards rushing, no touchdowns. Obviously not a huge pass catching threat, although he can get it done if he needs to. I think at the end of the day, though, I don't believe the Lions are going to give Swift a full workload. And so I would expect Jamal Williams to be involved. So he, to me, has the most upside of the 3, if you will.
Yeah, I think he's not only
tough situation though. Glad you're 6-0 because
right. I think he's got not only the most upside, but he's done the most and proven himself the most this season already. So it's like that's the guy I'm going to trust over a couple of these other guys that just haven't. Latavius Murray wasn't even on the field very much. A.J. Dillon has been on the field, but he scored one time in week 1 when he had his 20.1 performance. His highest number in the next 5 weeks was 9.2. No touchdowns after week 1. And in weeks 2 through 5, he had a total of 4 receptions. So, he's not a guy that you can lean on for PPR to kind of carry you there. And he just hasn't found the end zone. And like you said, the Packers probably going to be slaying the ball quite a bit. Aaron Rodgers versus Taylor Heineke, a legendary matchup that I'm looking forward to. I got to see that matchup at Lambeau Field last year. So definitely looking forward to that. But for what it's worth, Melvin Gordon and Latavius Murray ranked 35 and 36 by Zach in his rankings this week. Jamal Williams, 31. A.J. Dillon, 26. But I'm giving the nod to Jamal Williams. He's had 20-plus points a couple of times or 3 times this season. And they like to go to him when they're down towards the end zone. So that would be my pick here. Hard to go away from him.
And I could see that game, honestly, like even though the Cowboys have been solid defensively, that game could easily become a shootout knowing just how bad Detroit's defense is. Prescott's coming back, so a little PPR floor there for Williams and Swift both. Assuming they're splitting touches too. Broncos country update. This looks like it's not necessarily new, but Nathaniel Hackett supposedly had a, quote, great talk with Melvin Gordon and that he will likely start week 7. So take that for what it's worth. I wonder if Zach knew about that great talk when he ranked Gordon and Latavius Murray back-to-back in his rankings. I wonder if that great talk will influence the rankings as we get closer.
Obviously not. I mean, you can't rank a guy in the 30s when he had a great talk with his great head coach,
Broncos country, let's rock.
Right? You would have thought 7 weeks of games, a bunch of weeks of preseason and training camp before that. Who would have thought? All it takes is a nice little talk before week 7. So that'll definitely be something to keep your eye on. But I don't think Nathaniel Hackett is long for this career, at least as far as being a head coach. Jaden Lamb asked, to me, this only comes down, you're picking one of 2 guys here. You said pick 3 to start: Eckler, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, or Alvin Kamara. To me, I'm not even thinking about Breece Hall and Eckler right now. Those are 2 pretty easy must starts for me. We haven't obviously gotten a chance to talk about the New York Jets backfield. Obviously, you're a Jets fan. Carter started off hot, but Breece Hall took over in 3 weeks, and he's been great since then. He dominated the Packers. And like we talked about at the beginning of the stream, Austin Eckler, phenomenal right now. Number 1 scoring running back, catching the ball more than anybody else. He's an absolute must start. I like Breece Hall as well. So it comes down to Jonathan Taylor versus Kamara for me. Jonathan Taylor, obviously very, very disappointing as the number 1 overall pick in 99.9% of leagues this year. And Kamara plays tonight. So you got to make this decision here in the next 10 minutes or so. So let's dive into this one, Henry. First of all, do you agree with my assessment on Breece Hall and Eckler? And then our guys got to make a decision in the next 5-10 minutes here. So are you playing Kamara or are you going Jonathan Taylor?
Oh, golly. First of all, this team is stacked with running backs, so kudos to you.
Yeah, that's some quality drafting right there.
I actually might want to sit Breece Hall here. I'm actually, Jake, I'm going to steal a page out of your book, and I'm going to rule out Eckler and Kamara. Alvin Kamara is if he's healthy and he's going, he's a start for me, 100%. I don't care who he's playing because you do have that PPR ability there. You got that floor, assuming it's a PPR league, Jaden. So Kamara and Eckler are in my lineup.
Andy Dalton, whatever, offense tonight is going to run through. If it's not my guy Taysom Hill, it's going to run through Kamara. Olave coming back off injury, yeah, but Kamara's the guy there, obviously.
Now, I am curious to see exactly what Jonathan Taylor did the first time the Colts played the Titans. Obviously, he's coming off an injury here. A lot of people thought he was going to play last week. Shout out to Deion Jackson for getting my last winless team off the schneid finally. Taylor did nothing against the Titans, which is kind of in line with what Tennessee's been against the run this year. 20 carries, 42 yards. Tennessee ranks number 3 in DVOA, adjusted defensive efficiency against the run. And they have allowed the 5th fewest fantasy points per game to running backs. But the Broncos defense is solid.
The thing for me about
Broncos Jets game, I could totally see the Broncos Jets game being a 13-9 deal. The Jets did not last week's. Yeah, everybody's excited they beat the Packers. That was nothing that Zach Wilson and the offense did.
The Packers are bad. The Packers are really bad. I got on this stream 3 weeks
ago. The Jets
ago.
offense is still bad. The quarterback play is bad. So I'm not necessarily optimistic that Brees Hall is going to score 20 fantasy points per game. I like his usage. I like the PPR floor. I like the talent for sure. But Broncos defense is still one of the best in the league. So that's tough, man. I probably trust Jonathan Taylor.
The thing for me about Brees Hall is that even those first couple of weeks when he was splitting time and playing his first NFL game ever, like he hasn't laid a stinker yet. He had 10 points in week 1, 13 points in week 2, then a couple back-to-back 15-plus point weeks, and then he went 27-20. He's found the end zone 3 straight weeks and has had no less than 20 touches. Not great as far as PPR. He's had 2 receptions each of the last couple of weeks, but if he's able to do even 75% of what he's been doing on the ground the last 3 weeks, plus those 2 receptions, you're getting a solid number out of a guy, which again, like at this point of the season, especially when you're dealing with bye weeks and you're dealing with your opponent having bye weeks and whatever, sometimes instead of you want a number, like you want a number that you can rely on, which harkens back to a question that we actually accidentally skipped over. I think somebody asked if they should start. The comment disappeared, but it was Aaron Rodgers or somebody else. And my whole point kind of is like Aaron Rodgers for 5 straight weeks has gotten no less than 16 points. Like if you can build your roster around that number, and that's kind of what I'm leaning on here as far as Brees Hall. Like it's just tough for me. Yeah, Denver's got a good defense, but like even if nothing's working really, even if it is a low scoring game, they're probably going to lean on him more so than like trying to let Zach Wilson create a big time play. Or if nothing's working down the field, like let's give it to Brees Hall. It's just tough for me to go away from a guy who's scored in 3 straight weeks while touching the ball 20 or more times. For Jonathan Taylor, who he could have 35 points, but he also could have 4.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, and I'm not saying that Colts offense is anything to write home about here either. Like, can you trust them on a week-to-week basis? I don't know. Last week, Matt Ryan suddenly emerged from wherever he's been and put together a solid game. He's throwing the ball around. A bunch of receivers had a solid day, and that was without Jonathan Taylor in the lineup. But Taylor comes back. Does that mean the offensive line is suddenly able to now block and run the football, which they weren't able to do early in the year? I don't know. Maybe Ryan in the passing attack getting going is going to open some things up for the running game. Only time will tell there. But Broncos defense allowing more fantasy points per game to running backs. They actually are only 18th in adjusted DVOA against the run. They're first against the pass. So potentially can argue for sure that Denver is worse at defending the run than they are at the pass. Question is, do the Broncos respect Zach Wilson enough to not stack the box against somebody like Brees Hall? And if Jonathan Taylor's playing, I'm assuming he's going to be on the field for well over 80% of the Colts offensive snaps, provided he's healthy. Brees Hall has yet to play 70% of the Jets offensive snaps in a game this season. Now, obviously, it's trended up here these last few weeks. He's been over 65% every time, but 66, 69, 67. And, I don't know, Jake, you're saying you don't want to go away from him because he scored the last 3 weeks. I actually tend to look at touchdowns as something I don't want to bank on continuing, right? So, yeah, Brees Hall scored the last 3 weeks, but I take those touchdowns away, and what am I looking at here? Well, the last couple of games have been really solid. He's gotten a couple of some receptions and whatnot in there as well. But is he going to outscore Jonathan Taylor without a touchdown? That's, I think, what you have to ask yourself there. So.
Well, Jonathan Taylor has to find the end zone soon here too, right? Like we're in week 7 and he scored once and it was immediately in week 1. Like he has to find the end zone. And in order for a bad Colts team, even though the Titans aren't great either, like this is a division battle. These two teams always play each other super tough. The Colts need something here. They need their running back to be great. He's got to find the end zone. So I can kind of see that there. But it's not like Breece Hall is it's not like he's had 30 yards and a touchdown every week. Like, he is getting those big chunk plays. And yeah, the Packers numbers might be really skewed because the Packers are legitimately horrible against the run and might be just horrible as a team. But do you think that his percentage of plays goes down this week? Like, I don't see why it would. Or do you just think his effectiveness goes down, his efficiency goes down?
Oh, his efficiency has to regress, right? Like, look at the last couple of games. He's averaged over 5 yards per carry. To me, that's really tough to sustain just in the NFL in general, right? Like, you're averaging over 4 yards per carry. You're considered a very good running back. So I look at the 2 run defenses he faced. Where are we at here in DVOA? The Packers are dead last in DVOA against the run, and the Dolphins, well, Dolphins were obviously shorthanded offensively. Who knows how that played into their psyche? They're a decent run defense, but the Broncos defense is much better than the 2 units collectively. So I think, efficiency-wise, he has to come down this week. Like, there's no question about it.
So we got another question that regarding tonight's game. So we'll get to that right away. We're on a time crunch here. Kyle Pitts or Taysom Hill? Look, Kyle Pitts is yucky. He's yucky, man. They don't throw him the ball. He doesn't get in the end zone. He's this big body, this big presence out there, drafted 4th overall that they just refuse to use. Kyle Pitts has played over 20 games in the NFL. He has 1 touchdown. Kyle Pitts has fewer receptions than, like, I don't have an exact person, but he's not like, he's just completely underutilized. Yet the Falcons are finding a way to cover every single spread, win a couple games that they haven't, like, have no business or should not be winning. And they're doing it mostly without Kyle Pitts. Like, I just don't see, like, all of a sudden, boom, week 7 comes around and now he's a massive part of the game plan and super effective, and he's going to find the end zone a couple of times. He's played 21 games in his career, never missed a game yet. He's been healthy since he's been drafted. He has 1 touchdown. Taysom Hill, as we talked about 10, 15 minutes ago, he's found the end zone 5 times in the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks, whatever it is, 5 times. I only have him on 1 roster, luckily, but I mean, Zach and I talked about potentially he's a guy that you offload in week 2 or 3. We talked about it way back then before people can wise up to him. I think it's probably too late now, but I think Kyle Pitts is icky, and I avoid him whenever I can.
Same thing, though, for me, right? Like, it goes back to how much is Taysom Hill actually going to have the ball in his hands tonight? How much is he, like, going to be on the field to begin with?
Likely more than Kyle Pitts.
That's my worry.
Kyle Pitts has his receptions this year 2, 2, 5. Woo! Against Seattle. Other than the 5, 2, 2, 1. Didn't play against Tampa Bay. 3. Oh, and he did score against San Francisco. Oh, yay. Okay, that was his 2nd touchdown of his career. I didn't even realize that because I've just completely ignored him all season because he's disgusting. So he did score against San Francisco, ended up with 10.9 points with a touchdown.
Let me see here.
3.9, 3.9, 3.5. That's 60% of his performances this year. Even Taysom Hill's worst weeks, when he touches the ball 1 time, he gets 3.9 points.
That's a toss-up for me. I don't really like the situation with either one of them. I think if I need if I need a sure thing, I almost want to say I would lean with Pitts because that's the beauty of Taysom Hill, right? Like, you don't know, you have no idea how he's going to be involved in the offense on a given week. Kyle Pitts obviously is a disappointment this year, not playing all the offensive snaps, on and on, sure. But do I think he's going to get, a couple of receptions, some yards each week, yeah, I don't think you're going to be looking at a goose egg if you start Kyle Pitts. Taysom Hill, who knows? So if you need points, I would probably say make the big play and go with Taysom Hill tonight. Obviously, if he's utilized at all, like some other tight ends that the Cardinals have played, they have not defended that position well. So I think you'd be fine. And if you just need something out of your tight end spot, like, you're looking pretty good in your matchup otherwise, I would probably go with Pitts there. Definitely the more conservative play. That's, I guess, my 2 cents.
And again, it harkens back to the conversation that we had a little bit ago, where it's like these middle of the season, halfway through the fantasy season type matchups. A lot of your decisions should be being made based on your opponent as well, right? You're not just blindly making the best possible starting lineup like you are in weeks 2, 3, 4, whatever. Like, you can take some risks if you have a favorable matchup, or your opponent is streaming some guys, or whatever. Jeb Arm, screw it, I'll go Taysom, go big or go home. Again, I think that's a pretty good mindset to have right now, based on your fantasy record, on your matchup tonight. And another thing that I like about starting, say, a tight end on Thursday is whoever if you start a guy on Thursday night, he does go out and lay a goose egg, then you got to take some risks, or you got to build your lineup accordingly this weekend. Or opposite, he goes out and he scores 15 points or whatever, you got a nice little cushion to go into the weekend. So I don't usually like starting multiple players on a Thursday night, but if you can start a tight end or your wide receiver 2 on Thursday, and then kind of build your expectations for Sunday around that, I kind of like doing that at this point in the season. So thank you for the question. I hope Taysom Hill does well for you. I would almost put my life on it that Kyle Pitts does not score this coming week against Cincinnati. I mean, 2 touchdowns in 21 games, and then to score in back-to-back weeks, I would put a pretty hefty bet that Kyle Pitts not finding the end zone. So yeah, if you want to take that risk, probably Taysom Hill. If you're looking at, I don't know, any number of other tight ends, might be a little harder decision, but I personally hate Kyle Pitts, is fantasy wise at least.
I can tell.
Yeah, he's
there's a full on. How many has he been screwing you or something this year, Jake? Like,
No, I mean, I've only got him in one.
Do you need to open up to the community here?
I'm actually doing decent in that league. I've only got him in one, but it's just like I wrote a bunch of articles on him.
There it is, folks. There it is.
It's more if I had him in, like a Darnell Mooney, let's say. I drafted him in like 5 of my leagues this year, obviously pretty far down, but it's like that's a guy where, like, a total waste of a draft pick, haven't started him once, whatever. I cut him in a couple of leagues. Like, I could hold a vendetta against him. I just think Kyle Pitts is a bad fantasy option, and I don't even necessarily know if it's his fault. It might be Mariota's fault. It might be the coaching staff's fault. It might be just that they're finding success without making him a massive part of the offense. So, like, for some reason, they're refusing to. I don't know what the problem with Kyle Pitts is, but right now he's not a good fantasy tight end. And obviously he's very young, and that could change in coming years. But as high as people drafted him, he's not as big of a disappointment as Jonathan Taylor so far, but he's right up there.
Yeah, and that's the key to it, right? Like, if you took Pitts, depending on the size of your league, you had to do it in easily the first 6, 7 rounds, right? So that's based on his preseason ADP. So that's where the frustration element comes in, as you thought you had the tight end position sewn up, and you are getting 3 points a week sometimes out of it. So that's not what you signed up for when you drafted a tight end that high.
Exactly. So I think that's the last question that we had here. It's only 2 minutes until kickoff. A little bit of a slower week as far as questions, but we also did start a little bit late. What's that?
This guy asked about Michael Carter or Deion Jackson. I don't know if we touched on that one.
I don't believe we did.
Yeah, I think we skipped over that one to go to the Thursday night one, but I don't know how you can start Deion Jackson again. First of all, he left last week's game, so we even know if he's going to be active with that quad injury. That was a 1 week deal, at least until Jonathan Taylor and Naheem Hines both get hurt again, and then the former Duke Blue Devil Deion Jackson may resurface later in the season, I guess, at some point. But Yeah, you would have to go with Michael Carter there just because at least he's going to be on the field for 25-30% of the Jet snaps and do something. If Jonathan Taylor is active and Naheem Hines, I'm assuming he's going to be back as well this week from the concussion. But then you're looking at he's the RB3 there and probably not going to do a whole lot if he is active at all. So
all right. Let's do one real quick hitter, maybe like 30 seconds each, because I did have these jotted down. I wanted to ask you some other potential trade rumors. Mike Gesicki, Chase Claypool, and DJ Moore are all players who are potentially being on the block to be moved. Are any of those guys somebody that you'd be interested in? Obviously not giving up a ton for, but maybe trying to go get them for the back half of your season. Mike Gesicki, there's been no teams attached to him, but it's almost confirmed that the Dolphins are going to trade him. Chase Claypool and DJ Moore have been rumored to the Packers and some others. Any of those three worth trying to toss something to somebody and maybe have them for the back half of the season here?
Well, why didn't the Packers just re-sign Devontae Adams if they want a receiver now all of a sudden? That's
let's not start this.
Anyways, I mean, yeah, I think all three can play, right? Like Claypool's kind of a downfield weapon. So if the team's looking for a field stretcher, that would be where you go. Gesicki, like the talent's there to produce at the tight end spot. He's just kind of gotten phased out, I feel like, in Miami because of all the other weapons there now, right? Like even Trent Sherfield's a guy who can come out of nowhere and have a few receptions on a drive. So that's a pass-happy offense, but there's so much talent at wide receiver. And then you got a guy like Chase Edmonds out of the backfield who can catch passes as well. That just, I don't think it really revolves around the tight ends there anymore, but he can go somewhere else potentially and be a factor, absolutely. And DJ Moore, I mean, again, kind of just a factory of offensive sadness down there in Carolina. Like, so you would have to think he's going to be able. Sadness. You would have to think he's going to be able to play better wherever he is, right? Like we know the talent's there. We've seen what he's done previous years with who throwing in the ball, like guys like Kyle Allen and Cam.
He's had a list of very bad quarterbacks. It was Kyle Allen, and then he's had obviously Sam Darnold, PJ Tucker, Baker Mayfield. One guy before Kyle, who was there the year before the Kyle Allen?
That's what I'm trying to think. Like I'm missing somebody. Like
it's a pretty obvious one.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I can't remember either, but I think DJ Moore is incredibly talented. So is Chase Claypool. I would love either one of them. I don't even have a preference. I would love either one of them on the Packers. Obviously, I think Claypool's a little bit, like you said, that downfield, like massive play, can really go up and get the ball. Whereas DJ Moore is just super, super solid. And if you put the ball on him, he's going to make a play for you. But as far as trading fantasy-wise and like what you'd have to give up, I think you could get Mike Gesicki for pretty cheap. He's had 4 weeks where he's done just absolutely nothing. And like you said, a lot of that's probably scheme. But the 2 weeks where he was relevant, 3 total touchdowns between them. So obviously he's very, very touchdown, needs a touchdown. He leans heavily on touchdowns right now for fantasy success. I think you might be able to get yourself a nice little deal, especially if Gesicki's like the second tight end on a roster of a guy that's already got a pretty decent tight end or a guy that he's been starting over Gesicki anyway. You probably could go out and get some pretty decent value for him and then just hope he goes to a place that actually uses and appreciates him after that. So I think Gesicki's probably the cheapest option as far as trading here. But if Claypool or DJ Moore come to the Packers, I think either one of them could be pretty darn effective. So just wanted to throw that out there. And of course, NFL trade deadline. We got a little bit of time yet, so we can talk about that in future weeks as well. Henry, did you see any last questions or otherwise? I still can't see anything but the YouTube ones. So
I got you. Teddy Bridgewater was 2020 with DJ Moore. And then there were a couple of games with Will Greer back in 2019. That's right. Former West Virginia.
That's right. Teddy Bridgewater. Will Greer. Of course, Teddy covers. But, I mean, that list of quarterbacks for a guy that's still been able to at least, show how good he is playing with that list of guys. Like, that's That's kind of crazy. I'm definitely excited to see him go somewhere else. I actually do see. Do I trade Gabe Davis for Cortland Sutton?
Yeah, John.
I mean, without looking at the numbers here, Gabe Davis has obviously exploded in a couple chunk plays, but he's also on a very good team. But he's not necessarily getting lost in the shuffle there in that extremely talented offense. And Cortland Sutton, I mean, you want to trade for a Bronco right now in general? I don't know.
This is going to sound contrarian. I like this trade a lot. Assuming I'm reading this right, I'm trading away Gabe Davis for Cortland Sutton. I want to be on the Sutton side here. To me, even going back to the watching the Broncos practice there over the summer in person, Cortland Sutton put on a lot of muscle. He looked great in camp. To me, he's the alpha receiver there in Denver. So whether it's a banged up Russell Wilson or if Brett Rippon finally gets in there, which is what everybody's calling for out here, I think that week to week, Sutton is definitely the safer play, the higher floor. To me, Cortland Sutton is a wide receiver 2 and nothing less than that. And right now, coming to, let's say, week 7, wide receiver 18 on the season, 31 catches, 80 PPR fantasy points, only 1 touchdown. So he's the wide receiver 18 on the season with only 1 touchdown scored. And in that horrendous offense, Gabe Davis, wide receiver 23. I believe it was the Wednesday night show, the ranking show that I was listening to a little bit of last week. Zach and Luke and Trevor were talking about selling Gabe Davis off of whatever he was able to do in the Chiefs game. Now, I don't have his numbers from last week pulled up right in front of me here, but
I can get him here.
To me, you're trading a fantasy wide receiver 3 on his boom weeks. Maybe you're looking at a 2 in Gabe Davis for a guy in Cortland Sutton who has a floor of a fantasy wide receiver 2. And if the Broncos offense is ever able to figure it out here, he's only going to go up. So Gabe Davis is never going to be the top dog in that offense. And there's just so many weapons there. Whereas the Broncos, do they have weapons? I mean, everyone thought they did, but last week it was Greg Dulcich scoring a touchdown. So who I spot started in a league where, I just needed to pick up a tight end because my God was Dalton Schultz and he was out. So I was laughing when I saw that come in. But yeah, so I would make that trade. I don't know about you, Jake. But.
I saw him, or I saw a bunch of people tweeting out. He cashed a bunch of 33-1 tickets for first touchdown scorer as well last week. But you actually convinced me now that I bring up the numbers here. Gabe Davis has scored 4 touchdowns, which is really what has helped his fantasy value a ton versus Sutton's 1. But Davis has only had 26 targets to Sutton's 39.
Caught 14 passes. So it's kind of going back to the Breece Hall thing, right? And Gabe Davis is even more of an extreme example of, okay, Breece Hall's averaging almost 6 yards a carry here, over 5 yards consistently. He scored a touchdown 3 weeks in a row. So natural regression, you would think, is going to come in those areas. For Gabe Davis, you're not going to sustain a wide receiver, what did I say he was, 23 on the season. You're not going to sustain that, catching 14 receptions. Look at everyone else here. I'm just on the NFL fantasy page. So if the top 25 receivers are listed, everyone has no less than 25 receptions. I kid you not. Top 25 fantasy receivers on the season, except Gabe Davis, who's just sitting there with 14. Yeah, it's a no-brainer to make that trade if you want my honest opinion, even though I know you're trading from one of the most electric offenses in the league right now to one of the saddest, but I'd like to think the Broncos are going to improve a little bit, and just Gabe Davis's personal regression, it's bound to happen.
It makes sense, and he actually, Cortland Sutton actually has an 18 a differential of 18 between his receptions and his targets. So that Russell Wilson is looking to him. He's trying to get the ball to him. Like 18 targets more than receptions. Like, yeah, you'd love to see that number cut in half or whatever. But if he's looked for him this much and he's, targets 11, 10, 7, 11, like the ball is heading his direction. So I'm definitely with you there. And then hopefully naturally he finds the end zone more. But I guess, yeah, that's these numbers are pretty convincing. If you can get him straight up in a trade, I guess I probably would do that as well. And he faces the Jets, Jacksonville, a bye, and then you got Tennessee, Las Vegas, Carolina, and then Baltimore and Kansas City going into fantasy playoffs. So not the easiest, but not the hardest schedule either. And like you said, he's got a pretty high floor. So I guess I would probably make that trade as well.
That's the key there. And I don't know that I would necessarily said, Cortland Sutton's a buy low right now. I mean, yes, maybe just given the perception around the Broncos offense, but clearly outperforming, Jerry Jeudy and other guys there. But hey, this is kind of, sometimes you got to take what comes to you. And like, if you got offered this, I would pull the trigger for sure.
Oh yeah, 100%. Especially if somebody's asking you for this trade straight up, you probably press that. You probably press that accept button. Gabe Davis too. He went off obviously for 171 and 2 touchdowns against Pittsburgh, but his yards in the weeks surrounding that 37, 13, and then he came back with a strong 74. But I like that trade as well. So definitely come back next week and let us know if you did indeed make the trade and how it worked out for you if you're able to start him this weekend. All right. Well, it's almost 7:30. I think we covered quite a bit tonight, even though we started late. I apologize for that. I just started working out again 2 weeks ago, and I was at the gym a little bit.
You're getting swole.
Not really. I'm just trying to lose the man boobs and shrink the gut a little bit. But yeah, because it was getting bad. I went to put on my dress clothes because obviously I have to dress up for all my broadcasts and everything, and not a single pair of pants.
Did the button fall off?
Last year I actually ripped. So I had a pair of 30s from college that I was like, there's no chance that I'm getting in these. That button ripped, and the button didn't rip or anything, but it was like I couldn't have stood there for 5 minutes. So I'm back at it. I'm trying to work hard, and I went there at 5:30. So I do apologize.
There you go.
For the little bit of a late start, but Henry, it was great to have you back. We still went a full hour. Hopefully helped out a few people. We had a great week last week. Hopefully, same thing here this week. So crossing our fingers for a Taysom Hill touchdown. Don't forget Prize Picks. Head on over to Prize Picks. Almost anywhere in the United 50 states, you can play some DFS type style sports betting, win some money. If you use the code Flurry, FLURRY, you're going to get up to a $100 deposit match. So thank you to Prize Picks. Take advantage of that offer. Thank you, Henry. And I will talk to everybody tomorrow for the gambling stream. Very interesting board and a couple picks that I like this weekend. So, Henry, I'll talk to you off air if you maybe want to hop on that. If not, no big deal. We'll talk to everybody then. Thank you for tuning in. This has been the Week 7 Fantasy Football Start Sit Show presented by FlurrySports.